give a brief introduction. So, Sanjay is the author of the book Krishna Gopeshvara. He is serving as an IAS officer, and along with him we have got Chief Guest Sri Mohandas 5. Let me first invite Sri Mohandas ji into dais. Now let me please invite Sanjay Dikshit ji. And let me please invite Sri Prasanna ji. That's okay. I don't know this. It's okay. No, please be. So this particular book launching is organized by Swarajya. Prasanna ji is there, and then Indic Book Club. So this is the Bengaluru chapter of the Indic Book Club, and I am just a member of the coordinating committee in Bengaluru chapter, basically. So I don't want to delay further, and maybe we will have the session started. So I would like Sanjay ji to have a brief introduction to his book, and then Mohandas ji will be basically asking some questions and also giving his point of view and analysis of the book. So I invite Sanjay ji.
Speak from I'm sorry I got a little late because so of course I've been in this area for the last half an hour. I could reach this place only after much effort. Passed this by about 2 or 3 times. I also welcome Mohandas ji for gracing this function. He asked me for a copy of this book on Kindle. I suppose he's read it. Perfect. That's very nice. Now this question has been asked to me every time. Why another book on Krishna? Now I suppose there have been 1 million books, so if there is 1 million on the first book, that doesn't really take away from the effort. But of course I do. I welcome ISN. Come here.
Yeah, of course. You run for state. You're all these subjects.
Why don't you come and join us here? So this book basically is not aimed at the people who are very well schooled in the Krishna lore. Because I think there is a misconception that people who know Krishna story well should be reading it. In fact, it is aimed at people who do not know the Krishna story well. And that is the reason that I have made a conscious effort in this book to take out the supernatural elements and to try and explain in a way which becomes intelligible to everyone. That is the USP of this book. And that is why I am receiving feedback continuously that it is being liked by the younger people. But of course, people who know the Krishna tradition or the Krishna story well, even for them, there are lots and lots which they can really explore into it and find something meaningful. Because I have tried to weave the philosophy which informs the Krishna story into some small nuggets of conversation here and there without making it very serious or making it or really weighing it down. that has been the basic effort. Why I have written this is also because there have been a lot of discussions about how things like the very Sanatan traditions of Ahimsa and what is called Vasudha Kutumbakam or Ekam Satyatra Bhavada Vadanti, all these things are being thrown at the practitioners of Sanatan Dharma, and they are being told that these are all pacific ideas and you should stick to them in a way that even if you are being steamrolled, you should not be resisting at all. But that, of course, is not the idea, and if you read this book, then it comes across very clearly. I will not take very long to try and make a short introduction so that I just ignite sufficient interest in you to read the book. And since Mohandas ji has read the book very well, and some others have also read the book, I would like to spend more time in question and answer and discussions. I hand over to Mohandas ji.
Sanjay, Lord Krishna is a very complex character from what we know. Very complex because he comes here supposedly as a human being. He is a child who's growing up, has a very unique birth. Then he grows up as a coward. Then he becomes the savior of his people. And he goes through our human phase of different stages of life. He participates, he's a king and is crowned. And then he participates in the Mahabharata war on the side of righteousness, etc. Now, whether Krishna is real or he is something that is part of our civilization, why do you think this kind of a very different manifestation happened as compared to Rama? Because we have only Rama and Krishna as two individuals who are in a very human form worshipped throughout the country. Rama is a Maryada Purushottam, is a king, the ideal son, everything is ideal about him. Krishna is not ideal. He's very much more human. Here is an exemplar and here is a very human person. And that's why being so human, we all love him as a child, we love him as a young person, we love him as a teenager, we love him as a young man, women love him in many different ways, and we see him as a hero, and there are many manifestations which is where something everybody can associate with. Why do you think the Krishna Lord is so very different? What is that in that person?
You put it very succinctly. Krishna is very easy to love. Whereas the dominant emotion that we have for Rama is usually veneration. Shraddha for Ram and Prem for Krishna comes easy. At the same time, what is called the essence, as far as the essence is concerned, the essential qualities of the two are also very different. The essential quality of Ram is very easy to grasp. The essential quality of Krishna is difficult. In North India, we call Ram as a Sugam, and Krishna is in that sense Durgam. That it is said that if you have to follow somebody's example, please follow Rama's example. If you have to follow somebody's teaching, then you have to follow Krishna's teaching, because Krishna is a great teacher. Yesterday was Guru Purnima, and Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. He is called Jagat Guru, and yesterday I did puja to Krishna because he is Jagat Guru. After Adi Yogi, he is the first Yogeshwar and the only Yogeshwar. There is no avatar who is called Yogeshwar. So why he is called Yogeshwar? Why Ram is not called Yogeshwar? At least in Brij it is said that Ram is endowed with 12 kalas and Krishna is endowed with 16 kalas. 12 kala, 16 kala. So Krishna in that sense is rated higher in the evolution of his consciousness. Krishna comes from a much higher consciousness, and that is why it is said in Brijabhumi, it's also said in Awadh, where I come from, that listen to Krishna, follow Rama. Don't try to follow Krishna, you'll get beaten up. Easy for people to follow. That is the difference, the essential difference. Yet, it is easy to love Krishna, and it is easy to venerate Rama. Those are the dominant emotions as far as the person who's sitting in front is concerned. Seemingly contradictory. If you go deeper into it, then you are able to reconcile it.
Now, the Krishna lore is very different in different parts of the country. It has become topicalized in the sense that how we approach him, what we like about him is very, very different. How we sing about him, the Leelas, is very different in different parts of the country. How did this local variance come about all across in the telling of the story, in understanding about all his characteristics, and in the way people possibly react to him? And in each language, the richness of the language comes out in the songs that we sing. For example, in the south, we have Krishna ni begane baro, mukavanu toru. It is so beautiful. It's so very beautiful, but it's for us in the south. We understand Kannada, Tamil and Telugu, right? Correct? It's not for people who speak Bengali or Hindi, right? So each language has its own manifestation. So it's as if it belongs to everybody, but there are a lot of variations. How does all these variations come together, and why is there so many variations in our understanding of Krishna? Is it because he's so multifaceted, so very full, so very different, so very distinct for us that we see him in our own manifestation, in our own imagination? There are crores of imagination. Is it the intent of the story that it is very personal to you as also very common? Or it is just the way that in this country things happen by themselves and it's happened?
I think part of the question you answered yourself. Our country is so diverse, and our emotions, they manifest in so many different ways. And we have, fortunately in this country, the freedom to treat a deity in our own persona. So that is how a Jayadev is able to treat Krishna in a very different way. A Surdas looks at Krishna in a different way. A Vedavyas looks at him in a different way. But I think most of the answers he gives out himself in Bhagavad Gita, where each of the traditions he discusses. He starts out by discussing the Sankhya tradition, goes into the Jnana tradition, discusses the Yoga, discusses Bhakti. Each of them, if you go into the epistemology of it in the Indian tradition, each of them has a different epistemology. Veda and Vedanta would take 6 pramanas, and Yoga of Patanjali takes only 3 pramanas, Sankhya is 4, something like that. But Krishna discusses each one of them in Bhagavad Gita. And then in the end, when Arjuna still doesn't come around, then he says, forget it, you just look at me, that's all. Sarva dharman parityajya mamaekam sharanam vraja, because you don't seem to be understanding any of this, so you just follow me, that's all. So I suppose that kind of summarizes the approach that different people have to him. If you do not understand him at all, then all you need to do is to just surrender to him. Otherwise, you are free to follow the different paths that he is talking about. I guess that is very well summarized in Bhagavad Gita itself.
Now, what is the importance of the Gita for Krishna? It's a dilemma which so many of us face in our lives in a very different way. And here comes Krishna, and who comes, instead of giving a simple answer, it's not a simple answer. It's a very complex answer is a thesis on life. The thesis of the reason for existence, what we should do. The whole of Hindu philosophy is encapsulated in the Gita. Why was the Gita necessary for him? Was it something that people just had to create a character like Krishna to speak about the Gita so that people understand the Gita? Or it was important in the context of the war and dilemmas of the war and Mahayuddha for there to be something like this so beautiful to be explained to everybody? Or was it meant only for Arjuna as the great warrior and the center of the Mahabharata war to get his resolve back to fight the battle? Because in the entire Mahabharata and in Krishna's life, the Gita occupies a very central place. But it is not as if without the Gita the life of Krishna would be incomplete. The life of Krishna would not be incomplete. It is a complete life. But the Gita is in the center and is very uniquely positioned to be in the Mahabharata war. So what is the place of Gita in Krishna's life? Do you think without the Gita, Krishna's life will be incomplete or it will be complete? And the Gita was necessary, so Krishna had to be born. What is your interpretation?
I haven't yet got to interpreting it because it is in part 2 of the trilogy.
I'm sure you're going to write about it, but we want some peek previews of your thinking. I'm sure you thought about it.
It's very nice of you to give me all these questions. I'll find answers. Of course, again, I will go back to Gita only. Because if you look at Mahabharata, Gita occupies a central part. But many people do not know that Ramayana is also described in Mahabharata. So before we come to the war, all the stories that Mahabharata tells, Ramayana is also there in Mahabharata. Mahabharata is not there in Ramayana, but Ramayana is there in Mahabharata. So from there, when it comes to the war, the Great War, now the Great War, you can take it as an allegory, you can take it as a real event. You can, again, you have the liberty to interpret it in any which way. Like Mahatma Gandhi interpreted it in his own way. He said that this is the struggle of the mind. And everybody has the struggle of the mind, and then you have to go through this. But for me, the answer to Gita is again given within the Gita itself, and that is the last shloka of Gita. It's Yatra Yogeshvara Krishno, Yatra Bharto Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shil Vijayor Gotir Dhruva Nitir Matiramama. The best explanation for this has been given by Swami Chinmayananda. I don't know whether people here have heard that explanation. And that he says that this is again a symbolism, or you may even call it an allegory, that Arjuna represents action, but action without wisdom is fruitless. Krishna represents wisdom. So anything that you do in your life, and if you have action without wisdom or wisdom without action, it is not going to give you any fruitful result. But if you have action with wisdom, then everything follows.
But Arjuna represents no action, inaction. He didn't want to fight the war. It's the wisdom that forced him to fight the war. Because he said, I'm not going to fight the war. And he laid down his weapons. Then the wisdom had to come. Krishna had to tell him why he had to take up the bow and arrow and fight the war for righteousness, for Dharma. Right? So, are you saying wisdom drives action, or action is a reaction to wisdom?
And Arjun does represent action, because he is a person who actually is the only person, not even Yudhishthira is credited with having experienced what is called a Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That is credited to Arjun. That Arjun went to Indra's place to get all those weapons. And he did his penance and he experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And he was inspired by Krishna to go there in the first place. And Krishna chose him because he was the person who could perform the actions that would rescue Dharma, as Mahabharata calls it. Again, the concept of Dharma in Mahabharata is very complex. It is not one size fits all. It is in different places, relative kind of Dharma, different strands of Dharma. When they conflict with each other, then something has to prevail. As Vidur tells the Trashtra in Maharashtra, I think there's a very famous shloka is there that Kularthe Tyajyate Ekam, that for the community you give up your rights of the individual. Gramasyarthe Kulam Tyajit. Gramam Janpadasyarthe Atmarthe Pratvim Tyajit. Now, that is how Mahabharata treats Dharma, and a number of places, even though Bhishma is described as one of the greatest upholders of Dharma, then he is also indicted in a sense that he gets fixated onto his own Swadharma or his own Kshatriya Dharma so much that in his commitment to his father, he actually ends up destroying the entire Kuru race. Therefore, to say that Arjuna is not the epitome of action, in my mind, is not correct. Arjuna is the epitome of action. Temporarily, he is incapacitated, and then Krishna brings him back to his real self. And once he comes into his real self, and that is the time that Sanjay pronounces this verdict, not me, the Sanjay of Sanjay. He pronounces this verdict, and he says that Yatra Yogeshvara Krishna Yatra Bharto Dhanurdara Tatra Shri Vidyavar Dhruva Niti Vakarma. Gita to me, sometimes somebody told me that Gita, if you find it too heavy, just read the first and the last shloka, and that's about it.
Mahabharata, we know about the deceit. Deceit that happens in Yudhishthira, where he talks about Ashwatthama, and then about how Karna is deceived so that he doesn't kill Arjuna. Now, we learn from Dharma that there should not be deceit. Now, you see somebody who's a god to us, a godly figure, propound the use of deceit. How do you explain this dilemma? Is it only that gods can practice deceit, not human beings? Because gods are perfect?
I think I had said something to this effect in the beginning itself. Don't follow Krishna.
You don't want to explain that?
I will explain it.
Don't follow it.
When I said that, there is a purpose behind it. Because he is not Maryada Purushottam, because he is not practicing the Maryada of character. He is practicing the Maryada of mind. He is practicing the Maryada of consciousness.
Is he the ultimate politician?
You could say so in a way. He is ultimate in everything, not just a politician. There's so many variations, as you also said, that he could be considered ultimate in many things. He could be ultimate yogi also. He is called Yogeshwar for nothing.
But tell me, does the end justify the means? In the Mahabharata, does the end justify the means? Is Krishna telling us, yes, the means are useful, but the end justifies the means? Does it also say as a form of message for all of us?
Yes, it is a message for all of us. But then again, I come back to the same thing. You can't follow Krishna. Why you can't follow Krishna? I'll give you a reason. Give me 2 minutes to explain this.
Yes, please.
Because I've explained this in the book at some length. You see, you have to distinguish between what is called Kriya and Karma. Kriya is your apparent action, and Karma is the motivation behind it. And if you are in an exalted state of consciousness, then you look at things differently. Like Mahatma Gandhi said that the purity of means is very important. So he kept practicing the purity of means, and he ended up with a Holocaust. partition was probably as bad a Holocaust as the Holocaust for the Jews. Whereas Krishna was able to analyze Dharma in its highest meaning. Now that's something that one has to be very cautious about. You and me, if we start analyzing the highest position of Dharma, may not be able to do it because we are not in that kind of exalted state of consciousness. And that is why again and again I was saying that don't follow Krishna, follow his teachings. Because he is speaking from a different consciousness, different level of consciousness. Chitta, as we say. When we talk about Mana, Buddhi, Ahankara, Chitta, then Krishna is talking to you from his level of Chitta. He is trying to come down to the level of Buddhi and talking to you, but he is staying there. He is Yogeshwar. That is why he is called Yogeshwar. He is called Yogeshwar because his Maryada is of mind. When he is saying Hinsa, and even when we are saying Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, which I criticize very heavily, that Ahimsa is not the physical non-violence of the extreme kind that probably Mahatma Gandhi looked at. It is not the physical non-violence of the extreme kind. It is the non-violence of your consciousness. You are not intending to harm anyone. But then, if you see that there is a particular direction that Dharma has to take, then this man has to be finished off, he has to be a lay person to analyze the Dharma in that way is not possible. Even Yudhishthira was not able to do it. Because Yudhishthira's Dharma was very, very single dimensional. And he ended up creating a lot of crisis for himself and for his brothers because of that reason. And ultimately Krishna had come to rescue him. That entire Draupadi episode was because of I should say, Yudhishthira's delusion about his Swadharma, that okay, this is my Swadharma. Delusion, yes. His man Swadharma, then Rashtradarma must be made. So that is how I look at this part of playing deceit and everything that he is doing. Now the difficulty in this is that when a tyrant takes it upon himself to interpret Dharma in that way, then it leads to great tragedies. That again we have seen in our own history, we have seen in recent history, wherever we see that is where we have a fictional character here, we might have seen it. Some people think it is deliberate. Yes, it is deliberate.
Now, Sanjay, a couple of more questions, then we'll have an opening to everybody. Dharma permeates the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Dharma permeates Krishna's message to us in the Gita. Dharma permeates everything that people do. Now, in its purest form, what is this Dharma? Because today we have a very strange thing. We are not taught the concept of Dharma by anybody. There is no teaching in our school, there is no teaching in our colleges, there is no, our parents also possibly are semi-educated as us, maybe slightly more, because they would have heard people, read people. But we always talk about Dharma, Adharma. But what is this concept of Dharma? Where do you find a complete work on Dharma in a way that ordinary people can understand and practice?
This is like, the difficulty that science is having right now. Because they just kept discussing what to do.
Yes. Yes.
And Kans throughout Ugrasena and Sudharma Sabha in no time, because they were also sitting and discussing what to do and how to deal with this challenge of this Kans story. I have again discussed that in detail, made it into a fictional account, but that is only to illustrate the point. And that is why I think in those times, the kind of time, those were the limitations of communication and everything that we had, that we had a system where the rishis in the highest consciousness were the most venerated people. And any king or any people who in times of turmoil, in times of difficulty, always went and took counsel from them and followed them. So society was always the concern of the rishi. Rajya was always the concern of the king. And that is why when this debate starts about Hindu Rashtra and all that, I think on my Twitter I have asked many times whether you're talking about Hindu Rajya or Hindu Rashtra, because Hindu Rashtra is very different from Hindu Rajya.
Sanjay, last two questions. Krishna Gopeshvara is the first of the 3 books that you're going to write. How did you demarcate the books? Did you have something in the grand scheme in your mind to say, okay, I'm going to write this whole book, I'm going to divide it in 3 parts, part A, starting from A to B, B to C, or whatever it is? Or you just started writing and found that you're going on writing more and more, and you got tired and say, okay, this is part 1, we'll go to part 2 later when I got more time. How did you conceptualize the book? It's a very vast book, and you try to explain so many things. In this book itself, it requires 3 readings to understand the full book. It's a complex book. Even though you try to make it simple. You are a very learned man. We are not learned people. We are ordinary people. It's very complex, even for us. How did you conceptualize the whole 3 books?
Thank you for pulling my leg.
No, I'm serious.
Actually, when I started writing, after 3 or 4 chapters, I realized that it wasn't going to be easy to encapsulate within one book, because the story is so big. In fact, even 3 books are not sufficient. When K.M. Munshi wrote, he was able to write about 7 volumes, and he wasn't able to complete the 8th. And yet he wasn't able to complete, so he could not complete the whole story. So to be able to write it within 3 volumes is also a humongous task. And that is why I am going to eschew most of Mahabharata out of this. Except maybe devote 3 or 4 chapters to the actual war. Most of it would not be. There will be 1 chapter on Bhagavad Gita. And but again, people will write tones and tones on Bhagavad Gita alone. The story itself is so vast. The Bal Leela, which is most of the subject of the book. Bal Leela itself is so vast, and Bal Leela has so many miracles associated with it that it's a difficult task explaining away those miracles. Book, when I started writing, it was aimed at the younger crowd. And younger crowd is neither looking for nor attuned to high spiritual experience. So you have to explain it to them in simple, intelligible way which appeals to the intellect. You cannot start writing the highest level of consciousness, because they are not at that level. They are at the level of intellect. So you have to explain it to them at the level of intellect. And of course, if they develop interest and keep reading it, then they will be able to understand the difference between intellect and intelligence. Then the second part, of course, now the part that leads to the war. That itself is a very large part, where he fights so many people. He fights those pirates. He fights those people in the, you have this lore of Shilgala in the south of the Vindhyas. He fights Jarasandh. He fights Shishupal. And finally comes down to the Mahabharata war. With the rise of rationalism in the West, you find that the church and the state separated, but whatever the laws, what we call the laws of the state, they are still informed by that divinity that the Christian law supplies them. Even all our laws, what we call the English common law, is basically laws of the church. They are not laws of Dharma. Even when we talk about what we started with the French Revolution and the entire rights regime that came after Voltaire and all that philosophy, even those individual rights, somehow they try and partake the character of the state somewhere. This individual liberty, and now we have the almost kind of fundamentalism about individual liberties. Even if you look at them and you strip them down to their bones, then the fundamental philosophy is coming from the church. It is not coming from the Dharmic philosophy. Because in the Dharmic philosophy, the duties are very important. The duties are built from bottom up in our system, where the duties in the Abrahamic systems are laid down by God. Whoever the God spoke to laid down the rules and the laws. Therefore, this clash of narratives, initially when I started writing this book, I said that this is a clash of narratives. This is a clash of...
You stayed away from that.
No, it is there very much.
No, it is there, but you stayed away from a direct comparison.
If you look at Kutilmuni carefully, you'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some questions on that.
No, we finish. One last question.
So that clash of narratives we built into it, and as we go deeper into it, now we have that because Kutilmuni got killed, Krishna did not spare him. He did not follow the Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, and he had him killed in the end in this. Now we have his successor. So his successor might devise some different means, because the brutal force and imposition of brutal force did not work. So we might get subtler methods, like you have in some of the parts of India.
Opening the question, we have an event of launching the book.
Okay.
Which you so basically like every time you have to hold it.
Yeah.
But we need how that background.
Yeah, please put the back.
Could you please?
I read and I'm about to complete the book, so of course, Sri Mohandas wrote different dimensions of the book. The one thing that stood out was obviously the clash of narratives part that you were talking about. Somewhere the clash of civilization, clash of religion, which is a current topical theme, seems to be underlying resonance in the book actually. Like for example, there is this prophet-based monotheistic cult which is kind of emerging there. But of course, I can understand that it's a retelling of our Puranas. But from a realistic perspective, during those times in India, did we have a kind of a strand of monotheism ever been there as a part of our larger ecosystem, or is it that you wanted to kind of force fit a modern idea into that, the Purana context?
The idea got force fitted as the book progressed. But then I have mentioned that as far as monotheism concerned, there's never been any problem. There's been even a discussion on that.
Now we, the generation which you said that intellect and the caught in between the facts and the faith. So we are divided between fact and faith. All the books, what is there about Veda, everything, it is to do with the faith, because you cannot go back. and go back and see it live. And now we are in a phase where science is producing lots of facts. So we all believe in the facts because it's easy to comprehend. And do you see in the future, there will be a point where the faith and the facts converge? And when will that point? And where will the humanity end?
You're talking about a conflict between faith and fact. And we are also talking about the era of science, right? Have I got you right? Okay. A few days back, I had a kind of a stormy debate on a WhatsApp group. And that whole thing was that I had been having discussion with this gentleman, C.K. Raju, I don't know if you know him. And he has a very interesting theory, which I broadly agree with. He says that for most lay people, people like you and me, science is the new religion. Because anything you say that this is scientific, and we just believe it. No, what is the scientific method? That is not the scientific method. If somebody tells you that science has done this, or somebody says that, okay, now you can travel to the stars, and you just believe it. That is not the way of science. The scientific principle is basically three elements. What are those three elements? When you say science, you shouldn't talk about it loosely. You must know what is scientific, what is science, what is the scientific method. It should be universal. It should be verifiable. It should be repeatable. At least in this system. We're not talking about, say, if you bounce a ball here and it rises a certain amount. In Scandinavia also, you should be able to do that, repeat it, verify it, and say, okay, this is how it works. It will not happen if you go on the moon. It will happen in a very different way. But there's so many things that people tell you, and you just believe it. That, okay, such and such person has said, Stephen Hawking said something. The whole world believes Stephen Hawking. It's just a blind belief, even though the people who went into his theories and discussions, because in those situations, preserving your own body comes. In fact, there was no concept of sin at all. There's no concept of sin. There's no concept of salvation and damnation here. You will accumulate your karma. And that karma is not what you do apparently. Again in the book we discussed kriya and karma. So what you do, you go to a temple and you're fervently praying, everybody is saying that looks, the man is so devout, he's spending hours and hours praying, and in your mind you are plotting and scheming against your enemy. So the karma that you accumulate will be the one that you are thinking, not what you are doing. These things are very clear in Sanatana. It's a very harmonizing philosophy. Whereas the entire the Western philosophy is dialectics. There is a binary there. There is always a binary. Even in spiritualism, if you look at Western spiritualism, if you look at Kant, Hegel, Tolstoy, then free will and reason and consciousness are opposed to each other. So if you have reason, you do not have consciousness. If you have consciousness, you do not have reason. Reason versus consciousness. Free will versus necessity. So there is that element of determinism involved there. In fact, P.V. Mehta, the redoubtable P.V. Mehta, he once wrote a piece against Sadhguru, denouncing his kind of consciousness paradigm that he was trying to advocate. And brought in all these fancy, what is called, the fancy narratives that are very current, which sound very impressive. And I took him down. Like, where is Prasanna? Yeah. he would remember it. And even he took a lot of time to process that piece because it had to be written by Yogi.
Yogi is a super philosopher.
He would remember that. So, the whole thing is that you have to understand the basics, where it is coming from. No Western philosophy can go beyond belief, because that is the premise. There will be a belief. Over here, when we talk of consciousness, what is Krishna, Radha Krishna? Radha Krishna, ultimately, in the final analysis, is a mind consciousness play. Consciousness cannot exist without the mind. Consciousness is something that a human being is privileged to have because the human being possesses an intellect. Mana, Buddhi, Ahankara, Chitta. The four basics that we have. So, plants have the faculty of man. As far as Ahankara, the sense of identity is concerned, every animal has that. And the sensory perception of the animals is far, far more advanced than any human being. You can't hold a candle to them. No way. No way. We don't compare with them as far as the sensory perception is concerned. It is when it comes to intellect, because intellect is the vehicle to go to consciousness. The buddhi takes you to chitta. That the human being becomes a possibility. Human beings is a possibility. This human birth is a possibility. It's a possibility for you to go beyond your sense of identity and intellect and ascend into the state of Krishna Gopeshvara.
One question. I have read your book fully, almost fully. Some chapters are remaining. So one question is relevant to this debate on the Abraham. So there is this 18th chapter. There is a verse 63 where Krishna says, "I have instructed you everything, and all that secret knowledge I have given you. Now you can choose whatever you want to do."
Yes.
So can you, if you contrast this with whatever Abrahamic religions are saying, like here we have a supreme God which is giving you a choice, whereas you have various different religions with exclusivism and this is the only way that is correct. So is it? Can you please contrast this? Have you done any analysis on this and enlightened it in your book?
Yes, I mean, you read that chapter on debate, that I think 11th or 12th chapter, says debate. That is where we discuss it. That's what I said, that in Abrahamic religion, Shabda Praman is everything. If you go against Shabda Praman, then it is blasphemy. You are liable to be killed for going against the Shabda Praman. That is the only Praman. In fact, funny things you will see. I remember the debate that happened in Pakistan after this Peshawar killings of those children in that army school. And one guy came up with the theory that this is being done by the Indians. So he was asked for the proof. So he gave the proof of a hadith. All kind of intelligent people were sitting there. Not one of them could contradict that, because contradicting that would mean that they would become what is called wajibul qatl, fit to be killed. So you cannot go against Shabda Praman at the basic theological level. Whatever is written there, the word prescribes, that is fine.
Okay.
That is one of the most interesting character, and that is what you have put forward.
I mean, if you look at the philosophy of trilogy, it is anything that goes by a philosophy of violent imposition is encapsulated. So Marxists are reading Marx into them. In the old some people are reading even Nazism into him. Then so he also does this one finger salute. So a lot of these ISIS guys are exercised because they use this one finger salute. So anything that relates to violent imposition of a philosophy is Kutilmoni.
Okay. Yeah. As
Thank you.